Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Tea and Crystals podcast. I am T.
And I'm Crystal.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are so happy to have you with us today. We have a very exciting episode for you. We're going to be covering the Netflix documentary called Take Care of Maya. If you haven't had the chance to watch Take Care of Maya, well, that's too damn bad because we done warned you over the past couple of weeks that we were going to be covering it. But if you still didn't have the chance, we're going to be covering it here for you today in detail. Chris, before we get started, how are you?
I'm good. It's been a good week. I've been doing everything I can to get this episode set up because, even in our practice episodes, we really didn't do too much true crime. So this is very new for us. So I'm excited, worried, all those things when we're stepping out of our comfort zone and we're doing something new. So I hope you guys enjoy this. We're definitely going to go very detailed into essentially the documentary. Like I made some pretty hefty notes. Some of this stuff is pulled right from the documentary. So if you do watch the documentary, if you've seen the documentary, you'll recognize a lot of what's being said, obviously. But I'm excited. I think this is a really, as heartbreaking, infuriating as the story is, I think it's an important story, and I'm excited to finally start to go over it. I will reiterate to you guys, this is probably going to be a 2-part episode, so we're not going to get through everything in this episode. So next week's episode is going to be the conclusion of this. But I'm excited for it. I do want to say real quick, as someone who works in film and television production, or was, making her way through it before the writers and the actor strike. Although, I'm union strong. Even though I'm not part of a union, I was getting there. This was so beautifully done, and it was so beautifully edited. And I know a large part of that too was also because of the mother in this story, who took a lot of documentations.
Insane.
Yes.
How much she documented everything. Like, that's one of the most impressive things about the documentary to me.
Yes.
Is the fact that she was meticulous in recording this story.
Yeah, exactly. So it was so well done. So I definitely, if you haven't, definitely recommend you to go check it out. But you are going to hear the full story here over the next 2 episodes. So with that being said,
and get you a drink. Go ahead and get ready to wash some dishes. Whatever you're doing, we are your pastime. Go ahead and do it. Settle in, cause we finna go in.
We are. So like I said, this is something new for us. So it's a very serious subject. So it's probably not going to be as funny and humorous as our other stuff. Although Timmy, he likes to laugh at some inappropriate moments. So
stop, cause I'm about to. As soon as you said that, I start laughing. Y'all, I promise y'all, I am going to do my level best not to laugh at an inappropriate moment. But I make no promises.
No promises. Okay, so this is Take Care of Maya. So this story is about the Kowalski family, and it starts with Jack and Beata. So Beata came to the U.S. from communist Poland when she was just 16 years old. She attended high school in Chicago, where a teacher told her she would never be able to make it, which just ended up pushing her further. So she got herself through college. She became a nurse, and then she met Jack, who, fell in love with her pretty instantly. They got married, and Jack says that Beata very early on wanted to be a mother. She was very, very excited about that part. So they immediately started trying, but they had some difficulties early on. But after a while, they were able to have their firstborn child, which is Maya, who our story primarily centers around. So Maya, as soon as she was born, Beata took to being a mother amazingly. She gave all she could for little Maya. She gave her piano lessons. Maya went to Polish school. Beata would keep very detailed documents and notes about Maya from the moment she was born, and throughout her childhood and everything. 2 years after Maya was born, they had their final child, Kyle, a son. And Jack says, from then on, life was good for them. They lived in Florida. Beata was working as an infusion nurse, helping people with their treatments at home. Jack was a firefighter until he eventually retired. And
Which will come into play for me later.
mm-hmm.
Because if you've seen the documentary and you see how things progress, I really had to take a moment and pause. And I was like, you were running into burning buildings? But
Mm-hmm.
we'll get there.
But it could be, I mean, with burning buildings and everything, at the end of the day, no matter how much you care, they're still strangers. This is his actual child that he's dealing with at all times. His family. It's a little more personal. But I understand what you're saying.
But see, I ain't even talking about the emotional aspect. Like, I'm talking about more of the timing of his reactions.
Right.
I feel like if you're a firefighter, you have to be very quick to make decisions, quick,
Yeah.
in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like as we progress through the story, he just was not. But by this time, he was retired
Yeah.
already, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. So, maybe that
Played a
is why
part
he
in it.
retired.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it was still like it won't click in for me.
Yeah.
But we'll get there.
Yeah. So our story really begins in uh the later end of 2015. Maya began to get sick. She was in a great deal of pain, primarily in her arms, her legs, and her feet. She was very lethargic. She started having trouble moving. And Beata started taking Maya to the hospital to try to figure out what was wrong with her child. And it was early on during this time that she started to document the whole journey. So when I mean document, I mean not only did she keep written records of every single doctor's appointment,
Mm-hmm.
she had video recordings of the appointments, she had
Yep.
audio recordings of the appointments. When she had phone calls with doctors, she recorded those as well. So
Um,
you can
and they're in
really,
Florida, right?
yes,
Yeah. I wonder what the consent laws are there because Homegirl recorded
she
anything
did.
and anyone that was in her vicinity.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the consent laws, because I think at some point in the documentary it does show her telling the people, I'm recording this, is
Yeah.
that okay? So I don't
Yeah.
know if she did that for everyone, but she did.
Yeah.
She kept, and
Because I just
so
recently found out that Virginia is a one party consent
mhm,
state,
mhm.
which I always thought it was a two-party
I thought it
consent
was
state.
too.
So your boy is about to get out here and it's about to, it's about to be over for a lot of y'all. Just let y'all, this is a fair warning. Okay.
But so because of Beata's documentation, this is the primary reason why we're able to literally follow Maya's journey from the beginning on, and it's also probably a big reason why this documentary was able to be made. So in October of 2015, during a recording, Beata records an immunologist's office with the doctor. She states she didn't think much of Maya's symptoms. She thought it had been her asthma that was acting up until Maya began to have chest congestions. She was coughing up like yellow-green phlegm. She would have sinus infections. Maya couldn't go outside without beginning to cough, all that stuff. Jack states that it all started with her breathing. Her breathing problems started to get really bad. She had respiratory infections, headaches, blurred vision, and her skin started to feel like it was on fire, especially when being
Hmm.
touched. Her legs, in particular, uh, you know, just a simple graze felt like sharp pains. And because
Mm-hmm.
of that, her legs actually started to turn inwards and she couldn't walk
Mm-hmm.
anymore. She would cry throughout
Mm-hmm.
the night in extreme pain. And despite going to multiple doctors, nobody could figure out what was wrong. They went to so many hospitals, so many doctors trying to find the answer. And because of Beata being a nurse, she documented every one of these visits. So
Mm-hmm.
in the
And
recording,
you know what's wild about that
mm-hmm,
point of the process? I think Maya was so articulate
mm-hmm,
at her age
mm-hmm.
that people took her less seriously.
Yes, she was about 9 years old at this point
Yeah.
for the
But she was
audience.
very articulate,
Mm-hmm.
very, you know, I don't want to say poised, but like kind of, she had like a calm demeanor unless she was in pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like because she was so calm outside of the pain,
Mm-hmm.
outside of the flare ups and, stuff that people didn't take her seriously because she had such a chilled, natural disposition.
And I think she might have, because she was always in pain, I personally think she probably started to develop some sort of tolerance to pain. So
Mm-hmm.
it started to get to the point where it took a lot for her to really
Mm-hmm.
react. So she just
Yeah.
dealt with a lot of it internally. And I
And it seemed to
do.
be like very like, I don't want to say not explosive, but kind of like sporadic,
Mhm.
but like intense.
Yeah. Like when
Like
it
she would be
was.
chill, and then something would really really hurt, and then she would react to
Mhm.
that. But it would
Mhm.
be such an other end of the spectrum reaction that people thought that she was putting on.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it's like, no, this girl just has a tolerance for pain, and she just couldn't take that at
Yeah.
that moment.
Yeah. Agreed. So in that recording of the October 15th doctor's visit, the doctor is heard explaining that he really isn't sure what's going on, and that, with the kid they can say, "Oh, I can't breathe, I can't breathe." Um but for him, he can't know for sure that they're not just having an anxiety attack. And in that recording, you can hear him, he ended up just, leaving the room at one point, and you can hear Maya saying, "Mom, it's not an anxiety attack." And her mom is like, I know it's not. They're just trying to figure out what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
So it goes back to them just not really believing Maya, and
Hmm.
what she was describing. So
Which is crazy. Like, you have this child that's continuously coming up here, is in pain. You can see that she's in pain.
mhm,
Of course, you can't tell if she's actually in pain,
mhm,
but she's expressing to you that she's in pain. She's showing you and at this point, she's having physical manifestation
mhm,
of her symptoms where her legs, her ankles, and feet are turning inward,
mhm,
like to the point where it ain't just like, sometimes you walk, what's it called, pigeon toe
mhm.
on purpose. No, like her joints was actually like, babies when they first come out the womb,
Yep. Mhm.
like these joints be twisted up and turned up and stuff sometimes. Like that's how her legs was looking.
Yeah, and at this point, she couldn't even walk anymore. She couldn't bear weight on her. She was in
Yeah.
the wheelchair. She couldn't, she went from being a playful, happy girl to, within about, I want to say they said about 3 months, she deteriorated really quickly. Um, and she couldn't walk anymore because of the way her legs were. So she was in a wheelchair. Um,
Yeah.
So Beata, because of all of this, Jack said she would spend hours, sometimes into the night, just researching her symptoms, trying to find anybody who could possibly know what was going on with her daughter. And eventually she was able to find a doctor, Dr. Anthony Kirkpatrick. He was an anesthesiologist. Um, and she was able to get an appointment with him, which he also recorded that appointment for them. And it was in around end of October, beginning of September is when the appointment took place. So he points out that her feet turning in is known as dystonia, and that Maya's condition was so bad she couldn't safely bear weight. She was in a wheelchair. She could barely lift her right hand above her head. So when he asked her to lift her hand, she got about this far. Like, she couldn't lift it any higher than what her head was at. She couldn't put it behind her or anything. She couldn't do it with her left arm either. And then he had her mom hold up one of her feet. And he asked her to wiggle her toes, and you can see Maya. She's like really concentrating, but her toes are not moving at all. So it's at this point that he says it was clear that what Maya had was called CRPS, which is complex regional pain syndrome. So he goes on to explain that the best way to describe it is by how it evolves. For example, if you have an injury, you know, in a week or two, the pain's going to go down, the swelling's going to go down, and the redness is going to go down. Everything will go down. But in CRPS, it actually intensifies over that period of time. So published case studies indicates that incidence of CRPS increases dramatically from ages 9 to 11, and it's predominantly in female, which is exactly the category that Maya fell in. She was 9 years old, and she was a female. And that patients often describes their skin as becoming exquisitely sensitive to light touch. And I think the reason why a lot of doctors weren't necessarily taking her serious, or just didn't know how to diagnose her, is because this has only been recognized by modern medicine since the 1990s. So, you know,
and at that point, it was barely recognized.
Right.
Like, they were really acting like, oh, this is some type of, you know, side project experimental stuff that this weird anesthesiologist is doing.
Yeah. So,
you know, like, he don't really know what he's talking about.
Yeah. So although he is considered an expert in the field, it's not very well wide known. And you know, despite what some people might want to say, the 1990s was not very long. So, you know,
I don't know, girl. But every year I'm like, I'm looking in the rearview mirror, and that 90s is getting a little further and further away.
It's been like 10 years since the 1990s. I don't know what you're talking about.
You know what? Do not lie to me or you like that. Don't do that.
So, due to Maya's condition, Dr. Kirkpatrick said she had advanced CRPS and that they needed to get aggressive with it in order to control it. So at this point, he has treated over 3,000 patients. So he knows from experience that the best treatment was ketamine, which can be used to treat...
Ketamine.
It can be used
I ain't gonna hold you. That would have made me pause. Like,
I'm sure.
Whoa, what you mean ketamine? Like,
because I think it's probably around this time that ketamine was just really being introduced, but on the drug
that's exactly
scene.
What I was thinking.
Yeah. So, you know, it probably at that time had a really bad rap.
Because I remember after like pills had got big and like spice and all that stuff, then you started hearing about ketamine. And when I heard ketamine in the documentary, I was like, oh, not y'all finna drug this little girl.
I know.
Like,
I know. Yeah, I could definitely see where people would have concerns for it, but it can be used to treat pain management in chronic patients, because once it enters your system, it acts as a way of resetting the brain, and it tends to increase your blood pressure, increase your circulation, and increase your breathing.
Let me tell you something. I don't want nothing that's gonna reset my brain. I don't need that.
But I guess
don't need that.
I guess I kind of understand, you know, where for CRPS patient, it's like if something happens, if an injury happens and pain is recognized, then it's like your brain short circuits and it doesn't then recognize when the pain is no longer there, and instead it just increases for them. So when you reset it, the brain is kind of like, oh, there's actually nothing to feel pain about. I'm assuming in a simplified version of it. So I get it. And for a child to be in that much, I mean, when you have an adult who has chronic pain,
Well,
I mean, that's where a lot of suicides happen because they just can't deal with it. So for a
there it
child
is.
to go through
Yeah.
it, you're going to want to do whatever you can despite the risks.
Hmm.
So they did start Maya off on a relatively low dose, but it wasn't working. And so that's when he then discussed with both Beata and Maya about the ketamine coma procedure. So at this point,
Which wild.
the ketamine coma procedure.
Ketamine coma. That sound. You know what? That sounds like a good album title. Ketamine coma, coming out this fall. That sounds like a good. I like that.
At this
If I come out with a debut album, it may be called Ketamine
ketamine
Coma.
coma,
Yeah.
you're going to have a lot of people like, really? Really?
Really? Take care of Maya, Timmy.
um but yeah, and I haven't even looked it up to see if this has become more common in 2023, but at this point
Yeah.
in 2015, this was very much an experimental procedure. It wasn't even done in the States. In fact, the doctor said the only place it could be done was in Mexico. So that says a lot right there.
Which is where people, you know what, never mind.
Like I said,
Because that's where them chiclet fake teeth and them BBLs come from.
mm-hmm.
So,
Right. So
I listen, if I heard that, not saying, that, Mexico don't, because I done heard some good things about procedures. People go down there to get medicine. People go down there to get, their prescriptions filled and
mm-hmm.
dental work done and everything else. And they say it's amazing.
Right.
However, not for me.
Well, it might for them because he's based in Florida and he's going there to perform. So it's still him that's performed this procedure. It's not someone else. But I will say, yeah, you definitely have to be careful because I completely understand that. I see so many videos of people who want something done and it's so expensive here in the US. So they decide to go overseas. They go to Mexico, they go to Turkey, they go other places to get these procedures done at more than half the cost. They don't even need insurance because they can afford it by going to these other places and they turn out great. I just think, if that's the option you want to do, you just have to really, really research who you're going to make sure you.
But the other side of the coin, which I actually, I saw on a show or somewhere, I can't remember. But there was a dentist on the show and they were saying, there is nothing wrong. Because they were talking about, the veneers. Specifically. The dentist was saying there's nothing wrong with you wanting to go to these different countries and stuff and wanting to get these veneers and blah, 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 blah. But just know, a lot of dentists in the States that want to keep their license, if something happens to your teeth, you're not going to get help in the United States because these doctors don't want to take liability for what another dentist in another country did.
Yeah.
Like you have no safety net once you get back to the US. Like you're gonna have to go back there and hope that they can fix it. Like if you go down there and they just play in your mouth and you come back with them horse teeth, no dentist here is going to want to fix that because they're not going to want to risk their license because dentists have lost their licenses, trying to fix something and then somebody goes and complains to the board and now that person has lost their dentist practice, behind losing their license because they tried to help you fix some stuff that you got done down in Colombia.
Yeah. I feel you. Okay, so what is the ketamine coma procedure? So during the coma, doctors can use up to 50 times the typical dose to induce a 5-day coma. The treatment, like I said, is still considered experimental and is only available in Mexico. They were warned that Maya could die from such a procedure.
Oh my God.
But
that's crazy.
But the Kowalskis felt that there was no other options. Either do this or watch Maya continue to deteriorate every day. So I can't imagine that kind of decision. But to be perfectly honest, if I'm watching my child be in this pain day after day after 3 months, and nobody else in all the doctors that I've seen, me being a nurse myself, cannot figure out what's wrong with her. This is, and my child is telling me at 9 years old, they're telling me this is what I want to do, because at
And
the
they
end of the
have
day,
proof that it's worked for others.
yeah, because
I can't sit there and watch my baby be in pain.
yeah, because like I said, he's worked in about 3,000 patients. He has documented their recovery. You can kind of see a little clips of different girls in the videos on the documentary. So obviously there's been some sort of success in this with not only children doing this, but children around Maya's age. So the procedure took place in Monterrey, Mexico in November of 2015. Beata actually had audio recording before the procedure. And I will admit, Maya sounded scared. She was afraid of not waking up.
Hold on. We not gonna skip over that New England that just came out of you. Procedure. I heard it. That New England jumped out of you like the Exorcist. My God in heaven. She said, "Get it, procedure." Well, hold on, Benjamin Franklin. Slow your roll. Like, we're not just gonna skip over that. Come on, New England.
I get it from my mom.
I know that's right. Procedure. You know what? Declaration of Independence and all that. Chip, chip, cheerio. Yep. Whatever y'all say up there.
You know what? I will say, I think I'm someone who unintentionally mimics strong sounds. So my mom, when she goes to Massachusetts, her accent comes back quick. And when her accent comes back, there's certain words that she says, and the longer I'm around her saying that, and the longer I'm around my cousins who have very thick accents, you know, Boston type accents as well, I'll find myself unintentionally saying some words the way they are. And it's not in a disrespectful way. It's not in a way that I'm making fun of. It's just, it just involuntarily, it happens.
It happens to me all the time.
Yeah.
When I my wife tells me all the time, and her family too, especially her mom and dad. They're like, when you talk to us, like I'll be over their house, and then my mother or father will call, and then I get on the phone with them, and they're like, we can understand you when you speak to us, but if you get on the phone with your family, we can't understand what you're saying.
Yep.
I'm like, listen.
Yeah.
It's different. I don't hear it,
yeah,
but I'm sure it is different.
Because it's the same way as if I'm with someone who has a really deep country accent, suddenly that southerner in me comes out, and suddenly I have this really country accent, and I'm just like, and I don't notice it either until it's like I'll hear a word, I'm like, woo, whoa, whoa. That's not me.
Somebody whose name starts with an R that you and I worked with that lived in the same county that I lived in. If I were to talk to her, boy, we hee-hawing, pig wrestling, like we are the countries of the country bumpkins talking to each other.
Yeah.
But talking to y'all is a little bit different.
Yeah.
But not everybody in our county sounds like that, which is so wild to me.
Yeah.
Like you can talk to somebody that live, a couple doors down, and they don't sound nowhere near as country as we do.
Yeah. But I do think a lot of that, we're in a big military area, so we have people from all over that come through.
Yeah.
But I will say, I mean, for the longest time, I believed I didn't have an accent, which I was so upset about, because I like accents. And I remember my cousins coming down when we were, young adults, and my cousin Vicky, she loved the fact that we said y'all. In fact, she was trying to incorporate that into her speech. She would be talking, and then she would say something. She would say, "And y'all,"
I'm trying to co-op.
And then she would pause and be like, you see what I did there? You see how I used y'all?
And you know what I did? I
And she
didn't
would
actually.
like, she would text it and she'd be like, how do you spell y'all? And so
Oh,
we showed her how to spell it, and she would use it in her text message. She's like, I love your little accent. I love how y'all say y'all. It's so cute. So I would return the favor by saying wicked.
you know what? No. Even listen, and you and I are from, for people who's not from where we're from. You and I are only two cities geographically
Mm-hmm.
apart,
Mm-hmm.
and it's about a 45-minute distance.
Yeah.
And you and I have totally different accents. Like
Absolutely. Honestly.
mine is country as hell.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure if somebody listened to the both of us and they were from up north somewhere, they would
Mm-hmm.
be like, "Oh yeah, both of y'all country as hell."
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
All right. So Beata was doing an audio recording during when Maya was getting her I guess being put to sleep. So she did sound, I'm not gonna lie, she did sound scared. She was saying that she was afraid she wasn't gonna wake up. She asked if she was gonna be
Mm-hmm.
normal, and her mother was assuring her she would be fine, that she was and would be normal. And you can
Mm-hmm.
hear Maya crying, saying she felt weird, and her
Mm-hmm.
mom's just there comforting her, telling her, no, you're good. So
And I'm not gonna lie. This is where my insensitive side kicks in. Cause I was like, if you don't lay your little ass back, like, come on. We didn't came all the way down here, little girl. Like,
yeah,
I
you're
almost called
going
her
to
out her
sleep.
name.
You're going to sleep.
You're whether it's going to be the eternal rest or not,
Right.
you're going to sleep.
Right. But I imagine this is
Lord, forgive
probably
me.
at 9 years old. This is probably her very first procedure. So
Oh,
it's
I can
scary.
imagine. Me,
Mm-hmm.
I would have been scared.
Mm-hmm.
I would have had a full panic attack. They would have had to strap me to the table.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as grown me,
Yeah.
knowing all the logistics that went into getting her to this point,
Mm-hmm.
it may have been an elbow to the forehead. It may be an
Yeah.
elbow to the temple, like, take your ass to sleep.
I feel ya.
You know?
So during the documentary, it's interjected with kind of more present time where Maya and her family are doing depositions, and the nurses and doctors
Mm,
are doing their depositions. So in her deposition, she stated that she remembered being in a room and experiencing hallucinations due to the high doses, but she said she knew her mom was with
mm,
her and that it helped. So during this time, Beata was documenting the coma with videos, and for the most part, she was doing well. She was doing good on days 1 through 4, but on day 5, when Maya was supposed to wake up, she had a bad episode that morning with vomiting, so they had to give her extra ketamine, which caused her to stay in the coma for another day. But the next day,
mm,
on November 22nd, 2015, she woke up from her coma on the 6th day. She had the wiggles. It shows they're, like I said, very well documented. She had the wiggles. She was touching her face. She was constantly saying yes, even when they weren't quite asking questions. She was just like, yes, yes. And they got to her and they said, how are you doing? She said, she's good. They said, who is your brother? She said, Kyle, and they asked her to show them the sign, which was a thumbs up, which she did. And they said that went very well. She didn't seem to have any real adverse reactions to it, and that they were eager to get her home to see how this worked. And after the
mm,
coma, Maya was better. The ketamine helped tremendously with her pain. She had some slight memory loss, some blurry vision, but Maya stated she was willing to have those symptoms if it would help overall. So
mm,
she had a doctor's visit on January 6th, 2016. There's a video of her visiting Dr. Patrick to show her progress, and at that point she could now lift her arms like normal. She could put it behind her head.
mm,
She was able to move more freely. She was experiencing minor headaches compared to what she was, and that they were getting a lot
mm,
better, and that the pain in her legs were better. So although she couldn't walk still at this point, she was getting better.
mm,
Unfortunately, though, after Mexico, the Kowalskis could no longer afford Dr. Kirkpatrick's treatment, so they were referred to his colleague, Dr. Hanna, who took their insurance. So Dr. Hanna prescribed low doses of ketamine for Maya to maintain. And Beata continued to document Maya's recovery. She showed her getting stronger. She was using her arms more, even when she couldn't use her legs. She showed her
Mm-hmm.
like pulling herself up on things, showing her just being happy. She was playing. She was swimming
Yeah.
with her brother. She had started to
And
go back to
seeing all
school.
that footage is almost eerie,
Mm-hmm.
when you consider how the story progresses.
Yes.
But it's almost eerie because it's like she had this sense of like all of this is important.
Yes.
Like all of this needs
Yes.
to be documented, so the story can be told.
Yeah. Because even
Like it's
because at this point, life was good for them. They didn't think, it's not like she
yeah.
knew what was
Yeah.
going to happen.
What's gonna happen. Yeah.
So the fact that she still
At this
continued
point
to document it.
it was strictly about getting her daughter help,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in the best way that she knew how.
Yeah.
Little did she know.
Yeah, it was literally, it's like I said, it's eerie because it's literally the calm before the storm, because
Mm,
this happiness, this little bubble that they were in lasted for about a year. And
yeah.
ironically, in October of 2016, during Hurricane Matthew, it's the night Hurricane Matthew came through Florida, that's where things took a turn. So on this particular night, Maya woke up in extreme pain, primarily in her tummy. She was screaming and crying, begging for help. And Jack was home with her, but Beata was at work. So Jack called Beata, told her what was happening, and told her that he was going to take her to the ER, because she was in such pain. So that's when he decided to take her to Hopkins All Children's Hospital. So when they got there,
Mm,
none of the nurses knew what CRPS was or how it was treated. So after Jack kind of fumbled with how things were supposed to be done, he eventually got his wife back on the phone, where Beata informed the nurses that she needed pain meds, low dose naltrexone, and ketamine, which was just prescribed orally by her doctor. Um,
mm,
and during the depositions, the ER physicians, a Dr. Posey, stated that Beata's only concern was administering ketamine, and that she was demanding and belligerent. And then an ICU pediatric physician, Dr. Sanchez, said Beata was very controlling, stating, "This is what you are going to do." In the recording, Beata states, "You don't understand her medical diagnosis or how much it takes to control her pain." Dr. Sanchez then states in her deposition that high doses of ketamine can cause risks of respiratory failure, cardiac arrest, and felt that her daughter could die from this. And she said that despite this, it didn't seem like Beata was worried about that. So Maya.
and we have to keep in mind, you know, if you haven't seen the documentary, when these doctors are giving their accounts of what happened, it is dripping with ego.
It is,
Like you
yes.
can tell that they were they were not so concerned, and I'll say allegedly. They allegedly weren't so concerned about the patient that they had and what the patient was going through. They were more concerned about the fact that this lady had the audacity and the gall to give them professional recommendations. That's how it came off to me. Now, granted, there is a theme of Maya's mom being very assertive
Mm-hmm.
and not mincing words and getting straight to the point. Like
Mm-hmm.
she wasn't sugarcoating anything. She wasn't sliding anything in easy in the conversation. She was very direct,
Mm-hmm.
and her only concern was making sure that her daughter was taken care of.
Yeah.
And I think this is the point where her advocating for her child worked against her
Yeah.
in the worst way.
Agreed. I will now to speak on the other side of that.
Mm-hmm.
Despite how the nurses came off in the deposition,
Mm-hmm.
I want you to try to put yourself in their shoes in that moment, because
Yeah.
while we are seeing this with all the information already here and gathered and now know what the outcome
Mm-hmm.
is, at that moment they
Yeah.
didn't. So when you are trying to do your job and you have a parent coming in telling you,
Mm-hmm.
no, you need to do this, and she very
Yeah.
well could have come off as being demanding and belligerent in her,
Mm-hmm.
because that's kind of how she was. While I wouldn't go as far as
Yeah.
belligerent, demanding is something I think I would be able to safely
Yeah.
say Beata was, and I think
Yeah.
that's a large part
And
of.
that's based on the recordings that
Yes,
she did.
yes,
You
because
know,
when
it
Beata
was
speaks, there is no, like, there is a
question.
finality to what she
Yeah.
speaks. Everything she is
Yeah.
saying is,
It has to be
it
done. Like
has,
it's
yeah,
it is the end of the
she
road. Like
absolutely
you
means,
have to do this thing.
yeah, she absolutely means what she is saying. There is no
Yeah.
question about it. So
Yeah.
I could see how that would rub these nurses
Mm-hmm.
off by someone coming and trying to tell them to do their job, especially because they
Yeah.
probably deal with stuff like this all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't want
But you know,
people.
I feel like it's unfortunate because that is so true. You know,
Mm-hmm,
this is one case of the probably hundreds of cases, if
mm-hmm.
dozens of cases that they see in a
Yes.
shift,
Yes.
in the emergency room.
Mm-hmm.
But it really came off as they weren't even willing to consider what she was
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah. And I
It was
will.
very like, oh, I've heard of ketamine and I know ketamine is dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not even going to listen to that. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on, but I'm not even willing to take any information that will lead me to understand what's
Mm-hmm.
going on.
And I will
Because
say,
the opinion has to originate with me,
mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah, I will say also, because of the way they came off in their deposition, I imagine, because during their deposition, I don't think the the big things had even happened. I think this was still in the beginning of,
Yeah.
you know, this investigation. So
Hmm.
they probably felt that, you know, they were still right, and
Yeah.
they probably just were feeling aggravated by this person, this woman, and
This voice
how,
on the
how
phone.
she spoke to them and how she
Hmm.
treated them in their eyes. So that could also
Yeah.
play into why they were acting the way they were in these
Hmm.
depositions. Um,
Yeah.
so Maya was eventually moved from the ER and she was transferred to the pediatric intensive care unit. They started Maya on low dose ketamine, but that wasn't working because, at this point, Maya was taking very high doses of ketamine. So, in
Hmm.
order to manage her pain, low doses weren't going to do it. But they did start off on low dose ketamine. And during his deposition, pediatric cardiac ICU physician Dr. Malik stated that during those first few days with Maya, they didn't feel like they were making any progress or effect to Maya's status, and started to question the diagnosis of complex generalized pain syndrome.
Hmm.
Since the doctors were refusing to listen to Beata about how the low doses were not helping, Dr. Malik stated things were becoming belligerent and that there were talks of them leaving the hospital, which is when he started to feel unsafe about Maya. He says, if you have a suspicion of child abuse, they are required to contact CPS. The Kowalskis were told if they planned on trying to leave, that security would be called.
Mm.
So at this point, Maya is in the pediatric ICU. It's been a few
Mm.
days. She's been on low dose ketamine, but it hasn't been helping. And her parents have been insisting that they needed to up her dosage in order to get her back to where she needed to go. Because they were
Mm.
not listening, they were now trying um, to get to get Maya transferred to somewhere else where they would be listening.
Mm.
So that's
Which, as a parent, that is like that's your natural course of action. Like if you feel like
absolutely.
you've reached, a wall with this
Mm-hmm.
place, and you feel like, okay, my child isn't going to get the help that they need
Mm-hmm.
here. Like, of course, you would want to be like, all right, well, give me the papers that I need so I can move on, so I can get my child the help that they need, because I'm not finna listen to y'all when my baby in here hooping and hollering and screaming and carrying on. Like, I, no.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I agree. I would be in the same way. So, a few days later, while Jack was visiting Maya, a nurse had just finished checking her up and had left. And at that point, another woman with dark hair had come in. She was dressed as a nurse, and she started to ask Maya
Mm,
questions. Jack said that she had never stated who she was. She acted like any other doctor. And Maya said in her deposition, if they had known who she was, they would never have spoken to her. Jack
mm.
said she asked what's wrong with Maya, where is she being treated, asked about her medications, and then she asked how he could let someone give such a high dosage, which Jack told her that's what the doctor prescribed. So
And
during
you know what? This is when Jack started to get on my
Mhm.
nerves, because, gentlemen, I'm gonna speak to the fathers out there. I think it's very important to be an active and participatory parent in your child's
Mhm.
life.
Mhm.
I know a lot of us depend on our wives, girlfriends, baby mamas, even to take care of the details, and you know be there with the details when we need them, so we can do a lot of the um, other parts of the relationship. But in these instances, I feel like Jack was useless because he really had to defer to his wife for everything, which really set his wife up to be bulldozed.
Yeah, I
Like,
agree.
we'll get more into it, but low key, like, as much stuff went on, and as much as the mom kind of worked against herself, I felt I really feel like when it came down to it, like, not only did he set her up to fail, but when everything was going down, he left her hanging.
I can see that
For real,
absolutely.
for real.
Yeah.
But we'll get
We'll get
into
to
that.
that. So, um during right so uh during Dr. Hannah's deposition, the lawyer asked if the oral ketamine could cause the stomach pain, and he said it could be a side effect. He did admit that. Dr. Sally Smith, who was the nurse that is questioning Jack at this point, had stated that he was giving the child 1,000 milligrams at the time, day after day, which she says is not routine ketamine dosing. But Dr. Hannah states that his patients can take up to 1,500 milligrams a day, and that every patient is different. Some develop tolerances, or their disease progress requires higher doses. He says for Maya, 1,000 milligrams a day over 4 hours is typically what worked for Maya. Dr. Sally Smith said that there were multiple complaints from the doctors of suspected abuse, um, of something called Munchausen by proxy. And it was finally revealed at that point that Dr. Sally Smith was actually the what is it? The investigator for child abuse, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So after she had her conversation with Jack in the room, she left the room, and Jack says that the nurse that had been helping him came back in, and at that point informed him that he had to leave because Maya had now been taken into the state's custody.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And I want everybody to keep in mind, I'm sure, Krista, you have it in your notes, the revelations that will come out about, I'm gonna call her CPS, Child Protective Services worker.
mm-hmm,
How the company that she works for is tied into the private sector,
mm-hmm,
and how that plays into how they deal with cases of suspected child
yes,
abuse, and how low key it's a way for them to generate money
yes, and I will
by yeah.
I will be
Yeah,
getting
we'll
into
we'll get into that.
all the nitty gritty of that because it is wild,
Hmm. It is
and
sick. It is sick. Like,
it really,
as a parent, like, it really, I didn't even consider,
mm-hmm,
I don't live in the States. So it's not something that I consider anyway. But even if I did live in the States with my child, it's not something I would have considered a threat. You know what I'm saying?
mm-hmm,
Just me taking care of my child, and kids get sick, things happen, like, and what we will uncover as we progress through this story just makes you so afraid as a parent for anything to happen to your child.
yes, and it really makes you question the motives behind some of
Hmm.
the reasonings for why some families essentially get torn apart. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so at this point,
Yeah.
Jack is told that he had to leave. Maya was in state custody, and the rest of the story will continue in the next episode.
Yeah. Yeah, y'all. We let me tell you, we have set the foundation. Crystal has done a magnificent job of laying the framework for this story.
Mm,
You all must tune in to part two
yes,
of this story, because if y'all think that what y'all have heard so far is wild, just wait until you hear the next half of the story. You will not, I've been trying to hint to you all throughout the story of what is to come, but you truly will not believe what transpires through the rest of the story. I know the story, and I still can't believe it.
yeah, I agree with you. So
Yeah, but thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Crystal, for leading us this far.
you're welcome.
It has been, quite a joy,
Thank you so much.
to listen to you, retell the story. I'm getting mad all over again, and I'm trying.
It is. It's
I
very
am trying so
aggravating.
hard not to, but it is. This is one of the most frustrating stories that I've ever heard, especially the way that everything falls out in the next part.
Yes. So
But we will get there.
yes, we hope you guys end up tuning into the next part. If nothing else,
Absolutely.
feel free to go, and if you can't wait that long, feel free to go watch the video and then come back and
Mm-hmm.
hear the rest of our thoughts and opinions of it. Send us your thoughts and
Yeah.
opinions of it. Like I said, if
Please,
we can
please.
have time, we'll definitely love to read some of that out during the episode.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Get into, if y'all want to send us a DM, send us personal DMs, send
mhm.
us, DMs to our Tea and Crystal podcast socials. Let us leave comments, leave reviews, wherever you want to leave your opinion on our YouTube page. We will be corresponding with you. We will be interacting with you. We want to have conversations surrounding the story. If you have differing opinions than we do, we'll argue with you down in the comment section. It's we want to engage surrounding this story.
Absolutely.
But yes, thank y'all so much for listening and watching another episode of the Tea and Crystals podcast. If you want to watch the video version, if you want to see our beautiful faces, you can go on YouTube and search Tea and Crystal podcast. We have video versions that come out every single week. Crystal does an amazing job at editing those videos. Also, you can catch us on the Facebook at Tea and Crystals podcast. All of our clips for the upcoming week's episode are posted throughout the week. We also have recaps of our segments that Crystal posts after the episode is posted on all our social media platforms every Friday. So over the weekend, you can see snippets of the episode in longer form. If you just want to catch a couple of Reddit rabbit hole stories, you can do that. If you want to go back and watch them again, get you a laugh, and go do that because Crystal works hard to make this happen. You can also go over on the TikTok at Tea and Crystals podcast. Go for it on our Instagram. That is at Tea and Crystals pod. We will be doing some anonymous question and answer over there. I think it's pinned to our Instagram page. So if you go there, click the little bubble that's underneath of our profile name, you can submit some questions or some comments there. We also have all of our sneak peeks there. So go ahead over there and interact. Y'all have been doing very well with that. I've been getting some nice DMs about people saying how nice our video projection and stuff is. Again, everybody say thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Crystal. Yeah, okay. If you want to send us an email with any questions, comments, or concern, or if you want to say something that's going to get you cussed out and blocked, you can send that to tandcrystal@gmail.com. Remember, also, you can send us all your business there. If you want us to give you some terrible advice, if you want us to ruin your life because it is what I live for, make sure that you send it there. If you want to remain anonymous, make sure you send it from an anonymous source. Don't put your name in it, because if you do, I will say your name, and you better not get mad at me because it is your fault. Crystal, is there anything else that you want to say to people before we get up out of here?
Nope. I hope you guys will tune in next week. I hope you guys send us some comments and your opinions and thoughts through our socials. And yeah, we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, see y'all next week.
Bye.
Bye.